the Childcare on the Brink Town Hall event, sponsored by PCCY, First Up, and United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey. My name is Mariama Grimes. I'm the Managing Director of Early Learning at the United Way, and it's my pleasure to serve as your moderator this morning. Before we begin, just want to take care of a couple of housekeeping items. The first is that we've had over 500 people register for this event, which is the maximum limit. So if you know of anyone who was unable to register, no worries. This discussion is being recorded. It will be posted on the PCCY YouTube channel later today. I also believe that on the PCCY Facebook page, they're going to attempt to live stream this as well. Next, we have a very tight schedule, and because of time constraints, panelists most likely will not be able to answer your questions during our discussion. However, if you do have a question, please place it in the chat box. We have PCCY staff who are monitoring the box, and they will respond to you promptly. So I just want to start off with a brief preview of our discussion. The co-sponsors of this event want to stress the importance of maintaining quality as we begin to think about the best way to recover from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. So you'll first hear from some national experts about some of the system-wide issues of importance. Next, a representative from a large employer will talk about some of the concerns from that side. You'll also hear from two local providers here in Pennsylvania who are on the front lines. They'll share some of their experiences. And then we'll close out our discussion talking about advocacy at the local and state level and how you might be able to become involved. So with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Donna Cooper, Executive Director of PCCY.
Good morning, everybody. And if you've just joined us and I see people are still logging in, we are live on YouTube. So hopefully you're letting people know who can't get in to go to the PCCY YouTube channel, and the link to that is on our Facebook page at PCCY. And that's actually a Public Citizens for Children and Youth Facebook page. And I'm so grateful that the United Way of Greater Philadelphia and Southern New Jersey and First Up partnered with us to have this conversation today. Our goal, you'll get a lot of information, but we are doing this because we need to take action together collectively to make sure that the high quality early learning system that's been created over the last 20 years in Pennsylvania recovers effectively from this crisis. And so what we hope you'll take away from today is the information that you need to talk to your federal lawmakers, your state lawmakers, your local elected officials, to encourage them to take action, and we'll describe what kind of action is needed towards the end of this hour and a half. But we want you to keep in mind that we are here to learn together. We are here to support the high quality early learning system, and that collectively we need to take action from the information that we're getting today. So I am so thrilled that there's been such an extraordinary response from across Pennsylvania. And as we close out this morning, again, as I said, in about an hour and a half from now, that hopefully becomes a ripple effect where there's not a lawmaker in sight that doesn't know what's needed to ensure that the high quality early learning system in Pennsylvania can effectively recover. Thank you, Mariana.
Thanks, Donna. So let's get into it. We're going to first start with the national perspective. It's my pleasure to introduce three panelists. The first, Catherine B. Stevens. She's a resident scholar at the American Enterprise Institute. And Catherine leads the early childhood program there, where her work focuses on early development and learning of children. She studies the crucial role of early childhood in fostering better economic outcomes and breaking the cycle of intergenerational poverty in disadvantaged communities, as well as the challenges of implementing rapidly expanding early childhood initiatives. After Catherine, we'll be joined by Dr. Stephen Barnett. He's a Board of Governors professor and senior co-director of the National Institute for Early Education Research at Rutgers University. His research includes studies on the economics of early care and education, including costs and benefits, the long-term effects of preschool programs on children's learning and development, and the distribution of educational opportunities. And finally, we'll be joined by Harriet Dichter. Harriet provides early childhood policy consulting services to government, nonprofits, and foundations. She previously served at the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania as the founder and deputy secretary for the Office of Child Development and Early Learning, and as secretary of the Department of Public Welfare. So with that, I'll turn it over to Catherine.
Thanks so much, Mari. Can you guys hear me? Okay, great. I just have a couple of quick comments. The first is, I think in terms of reopening the economy, we need to keep our eye on the fact that the most urgent need is going to be with school-age children, not the youngest children. There was an analysis that came out of University of Chicago just this week. About 15% of the workforce pre-COVID has school age, will not be able to go back to work without school or care for their children, compared to around 5% of the youngest children. Some of you may have seen that yesterday Dr. Fauci was not necessarily encouraging about schools opening in the fall. They may not. So we have 15% of our workforce that can't go back to work without care for school-age kids. So that's something that we have to be focusing on in an urgent way in terms of reopening the economy. In terms of early childhood, which is my focus, I think this is the right time to be concentrating on shoring up what has long been the most fragile part of the childcare sector, and that is family childcare. In this context, as we are reopening our society over the foreseeable future, there are several reasons why home-based care is going to be especially important. First, it's probably going to be more appealing to parents. The idea of sending your baby, your 3-year-old, to a center it may give some parents pause. In an environment with fewer children, there's going to be less scope for disease transmission, and that's going to matter to parents. It's going to allow home-based care, also allows, or family child care, allows young siblings to be together during a time that's very stressful, so that's a real advantage. Family child care has lower overhead. In many states, centers are going to be facing new regulations in terms of taking temperatures and cleaning and distancing that are going to be costly, difficult for them to manage, and may give, as I said, may give parents pause. As I'm sure many people on this call know, ACF did a study recently showing that almost 100,000 family child care providers closed in the US between 2005 and 2017. As I understand it, that's a trend that has that's been continuing. So this has already been a crisis in the early childhood landscape, and I think that that's something that's already been a problem, and this is the time that it's perhaps even more important than it was before to be focusing on shoring up that sector. Finally, my last comment is that as we know, in any emergency, there's an inclination to rush and cut corners. Quality for school-age kids matters a lot, but as we know, they are likely to be more resilient. A month of mediocre care is not, or even a year, it will not have the impact on a 10-year-old that it would on an infant. And for the most vulnerable young children from disadvantaged families, quality will be more important, not less, going forward. We can only imagine. No one has any data on what is happening with families, but we can only imagine that there's going to be an increased number of families who are really struggling. And for those children, it is of the utmost importance that we provide high quality, nurturing environments for them during the day when their parents are able to go back to work. So those are my comments, and thanks very much for inviting me to participate.
Thank you so much. Dr. Barnett.
Thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm sure you're all aware that the current economic downturn is potentially the worst in most of our lifetimes. Even after the recovery, though, we can expect persistent negative effects if we don't learn from history. Decreased state and local government revenue is going to collide with the need for increased expenditures. Just how bad is this? Nationally, unemployment is already at 15%. That's the highest level since 1948. And we may hit 20%. A recent survey of small business found that half of all small business owners expected to be out of business within 6 months. We're already a couple of months into that. State and local government are already experiencing cash shortfalls, slashed 1 million jobs in March and April, many of them in schools. If we repeat the experience of the Great Recession, they're going to be in cutting mode for years, not just this year. With the Great Recession beginning in 2008, state and local governments didn't stop slashing jobs. That's not a recovery, that's cutting, until early 2013. That's 5 years later. The early childhood care and education sector is going to be hit especially hard because it's linked to parental employment. It is largely a discretionary budget item, not mandatory spending for state and local government. And eligibility for public funding is mostly means tested, that is income dependent. Now the system isn't uniform. Parts of it, like Head Start, are relatively resilient because it's a federal program, although even Head Start will face challenges. We don't have to just guess at what these impacts will be. NEAR has 20 years of data on one sector in early childhood, the state-funded pre-K, which primarily serves 4-year-olds, so it's a small part, but in most states it uses a mixed delivery system that includes private childcare. The last recession, as I said earlier, started in 2008. Real state funding cuts for pre-K lasted 4 years, from 2010 to 2013. Cuts in the number of children served were deepest in the 2012-13 school year. Many states rolled back quality standards and funding. 29 states still today spend less per child adjusted for inflation than they did prior to the Great Recession. That's a very long-term impact, right? Over a decade. At the same time, we saw that the Great Recession increased the need for public investments in early care and education. We can expect to see that repeated. The number of children who are income eligible for public programs grows with job losses and lower incomes. Child development suffers when parents have less to invest on their own in their children's home learning experiences and experiences out of home. We know this will increase inequality. Homes are less equal than programs, and it will lower productivity for a lifetime if we don't do something different this time. We already see dramatic consequences for childcare. A survey in March found half losing income from parent fees, another 25% from lower attendance of subsidy paid children. Most said they couldn't survive a closure of a month. Despite losing enrollment, though, half of them have parent inquiries asking about the availability of childcare due to school closures. If schools remain closed, childcare's role becomes even more important. Yet again, parents are looking to see if programs will be available. Many of them, more than half, are worried about their ability to pay for childcare in the future. To give you some indication of the size of this problem, the current ask in Congress to support the childcare sector is $50 billion in the short term and another $50 billion for the long term. So what will we do? Well, as states planning for the current situation with emergency childcare, planning to reopen childcare in the broader economy, there are really three primary considerations. And since this is Pennsylvania, I'm going to rely on Ben Franklin's adage, what we would like for all of us, and especially our children, is to be healthy, wealthy, and wise. So starting with healthy, we have to protect the health of our young children, their families, and their caregivers. We don't know what best practice is yet, but it's going to cost more. Programs will need guidance, they'll need training, they'll need the ability to pay for changes, whether it's paid sick leave for teachers, hazard pay to attract the qualified staff and keep them. Childcare is part of putting people back to work, especially as we enter summer and schools are closed. All of those kids need care. And if we're going to reopen schools, 75% of teachers are women, and many of them will need childcare. So it's interconnected with the issue of reopening schools. And finally, wise. As already noted, childcare can enhance children's learning and development, especially for the most disadvantaged children who are targeted by subsidies for childcare programs. But that only happens if quality is high. And there is a strong temptation in tough economic times to maintain enrollment, especially if costs are going up, but lower standards and skimp on supports for quality, whether that's direct payments to early childhood providers or funds for professional development and continuous improvement. We have to avoid that temptation and continue to invest in our children's learning and development. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Barnett, for your comments. Up next, discussing the threat to high quality is Ms. Harriet Dichter.
Thank you. I have some slides I prepared and my remarks are going to track very consistently with what Steve and Catherine already did, but I took a little bit deeper look at some of our Pennsylvania and Southeast Pennsylvania information to help us be oriented to the here and now of our community. So I pulled, with the help from the state, February data. And in February, we can see that we were serving about 25,000 kids in pre-K counts and about 6,500 in the Head Start supplemental. And particularly relevant to our conversation, almost half of the pre-K counts kids are being served in childcare programs. It's a smaller number, about 27%, who are being served in the Head Start supplemental. Then I looked at our overall childcare initiative to see how the state was doing in terms of our full supply and in terms of numbers. And so this slide is just showing you February. And just for a moment, because it's a lot to see, to draw your attention to our total numbers statewide of programs at the bottom row, about 7,000 in February, and in the southeastern portion of the state, about 2,874. Now we get to May. This is data pulled from 2 days ago. And so in May, what we're looking at is both how we're doing in terms of our quality initiative, who's open and closed, and also how we're doing in global. And you're going to see that's 1,540 statewide open and 532 in the Southeast. to make this easier for everyone, I have a slide in plain English here. So by star level, we can see that in February, statewide, we had 25% at star 3 or 4 and 23% in the Southeast. By May, we had a loss. 18% of those open at star 3 or 4, 19% in the Southeast. So we know that in terms of choices or lack of choices providers were making during this current phase of the pandemic, we see some losses in quality. If we then look at open and shut, we can see that in Pennsylvania, in May, we have 22% of all providers statewide open. That means 78% are closed, to the point that Catherine made, and I think the data is here for around the country. Of those who are open and closed, we have a much higher yield of home-based providers who decided to stay open. Pennsylvania did have additional procedures, as people know, for centers to try to stay open, but that's where we went. And then I ran the data for the Southeast. Basically, it's not totally dissimilar. It's okay, more shut down in the Southeast counties. So let's look at first what the state's early actions were that had to do with sustaining quality. So one of those early actions was payment levels for kids in pre-K counts and Head Start. These are programs that were shut, all right? And so programs being paid for some implication here, and I looked at the data here for the Southeast. So 48 pre-K counts children in childcare programs in the Southeast, providers who are childcare receiving some resources, even though they're not offering services. And likewise for the Head Start supplemental, you can see that. Then we can see for those programs exclusively participating in the state's child care subsidy program, whether open or closed, a couple of months worth of child care works payments that are based on attendance, not on enrollment, sorry, not attendance. And also if families were essential workers and were needing child care, if they switched up providers, providers continued to be paid. And I think something the state has talked a little bit less about, which is the add-on rates for quality continued. Those were not cut. So now let's just look for a minute at some of the things we're starting to see emerge from other states who have already made announcements about how they're using their CARES Act money. So New Mexico is actually prioritizing, you can see here, these themes we've been talking about around basically trying to support the workforce and trying to support quality. So New Mexico is giving compensation boosts with their CARES Act money, whether full-time or part-time, and I just put in the dollars that they were able to allocate. And they also are giving recovery and stabilization funds for businesses, childcare businesses across the state. They are doing that based on size. They're doing it basically with differential amounts for those who do participate in subsidy. And they're also adding on payments for highly vulnerable populations, infants and toddlers, and those who participate in the state's quality initiative. Quickly, let's just look high level at two other states. North Carolina is adding compensation bonuses for providers that are open. These are the amounts that they've put in. And Michigan is paying programs open or closed to try to deal with sustainability and quality by provider type, where they are in terms of the emergency services, provider star size, and star rating. So in my few remaining minutes, I just want to go over some of the things that are implications for us. And these really, in many ways, deeply mirror what we've already heard from what Steve and Catherine said. So if we look up at the top, so what is childcare? We have a sharper understanding. It's not that we didn't have this understanding before, but the pandemic is reminding us that childcare is economic infrastructure, but also importantly, as we have tried to emphasize, it is child development and early learning, and it is also support for our families. It's a family support and engagement strategy. So some of those implications are big in terms of public payment. Steve talked a lot about the fact that we have less resources, but we're going to need a lot more, and that we're going to need this public payment and many more programs to maintain and ensure stability, quality infrastructure, compensation, and supply. So that really means rethinking beyond where we are now. What is the state role? It is more than licensing. It is more than tuition relief for low-income families and quality initiatives for selected low-income children. Relative to that, quality is pretty clearly a part of the infrastructure investment, and I cannot say this enough. It is not an afterthought that we will get back to later. That is a mistake if we can, think that we are just providing a custodial care service for families because of its economic support value. So this does mean, and we've got a dilemma here, that we're going to need deeper public investment in our programs, particularly in our programs that in our communities that lack a supply of quality, such as the infant toddler deserts that we have. So we can think of this in terms of solutions that we may need to think about this very differently. Base investments in all of our programs, bringing sufficient stable money across providers that cover the cost of them being able to do business, that includes participation in our state's quality initiatives, including any new public health requirements. I know we have providers on the call, and I know they will tell us that if we deeply try to comply with the additional stepped up health and safety, there are high expenses staffing-wise associated with that. Provision of middle-class compensation to people, whether they're working in family-based settings or in centers. And then, of course, things like assuring service provision for a population that is not, is hard to serve, basically, and requires a lot more level of investment to do it well. The other piece here related to this, I think, is a reconsideration in a very fundamental way about how we in Pennsylvania and other states around the country are funding these programs. If our goals are supply and stability, quality and compensation, then the voucherized approach that we have been using for childcare, we do not use this for pre-K counts or for the Head Start supplemental, but we use this for childcare. They do not come close to helping us reach these goals. So I think the implications here would be move out of these voucherized approaches and into contract-based approaches that allow us to create funded and accountable networks of both our home-based and center-based programs, that we provide these base investments I mentioned, and that we have to find a way to figure out how we are going to get additional resources into programs when collecting tuition is beyond family means. And I would say provocatively to end, ideally consolidated then with the good work that we've been able to do for the state's pre-K programs. So that brings me to the end of my remarks, and back to you, Mariama.
Thank you, Harriet. That's a fantastic overview of the issues here in Pennsylvania. We're going to shift now to better understand some employer concerns. Will employees have access to quality childcare? And we will be joined by Crystal Shannon. Crystal is a principal and program officer at Vanguard. She currently is responsible for stewarding philanthropic investments of Vanguard's foundations and corporate grant portfolios, including co-leading the Vanguard Strong Start for Kids program. Crystal has spent the bulk of her career at Vanguard leading back office functions and large technology projects in business operations. Welcome, Crystal.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to present an employer's perspective. For those that are unfamiliar with Vanguard, I'll start with some background. So we're one of the world's largest investment and financial services firms with about $5 trillion in global assets under management. We have 19 global offices, 4 in the US, with our largest site being our headquarters located just outside of Philadelphia in Malvern, Pennsylvania. About 12,000 employees work at our headquarters, representing roughly 2/3 of our workforce. Our employees live across Pennsylvania's southeast region in every nearby county. Clients trust us to steward their investment assets, which represents retirement savings, college savings, and often life savings. Central to our mission of giving our clients the best chance for investment success is our people. We have an engaged and skilled workforce that our clients in the industry rely on. As a company, we're navigating these unprecedented times, but our business strategy has fared relatively well. We plan for severe economic downturns, volatile markets, and threats to business continuity. What has emerged, though, as a top concern beyond the health and safety of our people is an extraordinary amount of individual stress. Now, it doesn't compare to essential workers on the front line of this pandemic, to be sure, but certainly elevated well beyond what our Human Services Division considers as normal. They say that anxiety, stress, and childcare are ever present in the discussions they are having. And they have set a tone for leaders to be as flexible and as creative as possible to meet our employees' individual needs. We have approximately 5,000 employees in the US with children under the age of 13 who are trying to work and take care of their children at the same time in the same space. Most are somehow making it work right now. However, for the employees that just can't make it work, we introduced a new temporary child care leave program that allows employees to take up to 8 weeks leave to focus on their children while still drawing a large percentage of their pay. This has been well received, both for the employees who need it and for the employees who don't, but see it as the right thing given the situation. And this is just an example of the levers we're pulling to address employees' individual needs. We are doing everything that we can. As we think about one day returning to the office, we have no solution for employees if they cannot find suitable childcare arrangements. We are totally reliant on the childcare sector and on K-12 schools. I can also say, because early childhood is Vanguard's signature philanthropic issue, our employees know how critically important quality in those settings is to the development of their children. Educating employees about what quality looks like and why it matters has been totally integrated into our annual workplace campaign communications. This messaging has been internalized because we get questions about it. So when it comes to making decisions about options for their children, quality will be at the forefront, if not the primary determining factor. If the quality options they were using aren't available to them and they can't find alternatives on par, they will not physically return back to the office. We know this, and we're not alone. Other companies, large and small, face the same dilemma. It is our hope that state officials understand that getting Pennsylvania's economy back on track can't happen unless we can at least get back to where we were in terms of availability of quality childcare, which many of us would agree wasn't enough to begin with, but in terms of recovery should be the goal in the short run. I know that it's complicated. We have a childcare sector that is underfunded and now in crisis, but this pandemic really has demonstrated how essential these services are. I see it as, a great opportunity to really elevate and strengthen the sector, given its importance to children, families, and the business community.
Thank you so much, Crystal. I believe, Donna, you had some words you'd like to share?
Yes, I just wanted to say that for everybody who's listening, a lot of providers are on this call, and there are many questions that we know providers have about what will be the procedures when I reopen. How often will I have to clean? Will I need to take people's temperatures? What happens if my staff member has COVID? What if somebody comes from a family with COVID? The logistical issues associated with reopening can be overwhelming. And they are overwhelming, and we don't have the answers yet. And as you know, the state released some guidance the other day, but it was really guidance from the CDC, and we just don't have enough clarity. And I just want to give everybody a chance who's been listening a moment to just reflect that in addition to thinking about the day-to-day policies that need to be put in place so that children and childcare staff and pre-K and Head Start staff are safe and healthy. We have these bigger global issues that we're really trying to elucidate today, because our Pennsylvania surveys show that 30% of the sector, whether they're home-based or center-based, can't see themselves reopening if this COVID crisis continues and there aren't financial resources to continue to enable them, even at a modicum of operation, that would ensure they could reopen for the workforce. And so Crystal's point about the importance of having quality and enabling people to come to work, and Catherine's point about 5% of the workforce, the youngest part of the workforce, are really, really critical for us to think about collectively, you know, coming out of my center and into the global conversation of what's it going to take for the entire sector to be sustain quality and be ready for the workers. So I just want to thank Catherine, Steve, and Harriet for really helping us think about those important questions, and for Crystal to share with us how, you know, one of our region's biggest employers is looking at this issue, because we need to think a little bit bigger collectively as a sector to guide our lawmakers to make the right global decisions so that OCDEL has the resources to offer you as providers the guidance and support to make the right decisions as it comes to our children and families. So I just wanted to sort of wrap up that part of this conversation. Thank you.
Thanks, Donna. So with that, we're going to transition to hear from some of the local providers and what they're doing to maintain quality now and what they hope to do in the future. First, we have joining us Stacy Woodland. Stacy is the CEO of the YWCA Tri-County area, which operates the Pottstown Early Education Center, a Star 4 childcare facility with all classrooms using curriculum-based learning. And then we also will have joining us Minette Taylor. Minette is the owner-operator of GT Daycare, a Star 4 home-based provider located in the Somerton section of Philadelphia that has been in operation for approximately a decade. Ladies, welcome to the discussion.
Thank you so much for having us. And I think I just wanted to start and talk about the fact that since we closed on March 12th, YWCA is located in Montgomery County. We're the westernmost tip, that's where Pottstown is. And Montgomery County was deemed the epicenter of the COVID virus spread of Pennsylvania. And so we experienced the very first closings, and we're closed on Thursday, March 12th. I think when we closed, and we were expected to stay closed until March 31st, the first thing when I alerted our early education team that we were going to be closed until March 31st, their first question was, are we being closed? Are we leaving with pay? And I didn't have an answer to that question right away. I didn't know what would happen with our funding streams and whether they would continue uninterruptedly. Certainly we have private pay families and co-pays and all those things that certainly wouldn't continue. And I think through the continued support of our funded programs, our early Head Start, our pre-K counts, we also have an infant toddler blended program. We were able to continue to pay our team and have continued to pay them throughout this, and have had them continue to do professional development so that when we do reopen, we will reopen stronger than we closed. But that hasn't been without its challenges, and to ensure that we are being proactive about what is it going to take to reopen our center, to families, and have them feel assured that their children are safe, the teachers are safe. To the best of our ability, we are, like everyone else on the call, still waiting for exactly what that guidance and what those requirements will be. And the sooner they create them, even in the absence of a firm opening date, will be the best for the sector also, to allow for us to begin to prepare and put those pieces into place. I think when I was listening previously, I also was thinking this is a great opportunity for partnerships with organizations and companies like Vanguard who value early education centers and think about ways to support their staff, I would say, you know, there are going to be some centers who may not be able to be sustained, but a partnership with a strong employer might support everybody really well.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that, you know, as we are looking, I think, and thinking about the impact of having the workforce return to work without childcare, I think there's a lot of impact to millennials who are parents now.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them are who are parents are two working family, they both are working. And so without childcare, there's significant impact to that group of people. And it's just important for us to continue to work on the quality and have our legislators really value the work that we give to the children and the importance of children's development by continuing to think about how to fund us as we navigate this crisis.
Thank you, Stacy. Minette? You're muted.
Can you hear me?
Okay, now we can.
We can hear you. Oh, I was saying hello to everyone and thank you for having me. When this opportunity came knocking at my door to come and speak on this panel, I immediately reached out to my colleagues. A lot of questions came up and concerns about early childhood educators and business owners. We worked hard to have high quality programs. So I've been a Star 4 program for over 20 years, and I maintain high quality all the time. So I need to know right now, pretty much, what is high quality now? What is the role for us as providers? And who is having the conversation for family and group providers right now? So are we still going to be measuring quality at in this COVID time? Do y'all know that Feckers and Eckers and Itters in class is not designed for COVID? So what are going to be our new quality instruments to give us the best guidance? Because nothing is built on the situation that we're in. As family and group childcare programs begin to move forward, we open during this COVID season, we are facing a lot of heavy expenses. Even with enough families and staff to open the family childcare program, we are facing a lot of expenses with PPE equipment, hand sanitizers, and all these other things like work compensation, even buying supplies for parallel play and washing and sanitizing toys daily. We don't know where the funds are coming from. So since childcare industry has now become hazardous, will we be afforded more closure days with compensation if providers become ill due to COVID? Because I'm still open. So if other programs like family providers become open, are they going to have some kind of compensation for us if we do catch the COVID virus? So if there are going to be new regulations and money to support the family and group programs to implement these new regulations, this cost cannot be placed on providers or families, because adding these costs is a burden to us. Because of the low reimbursement, family and group childcare programs cannot afford it. We cannot control this pandemic. So we just looking to, I guess, as a group of providers together, we was just looking at the governor to give us some support and guidance, because we're not getting the guidance that we need to maintain high quality care. The communication of ethics between the governor and the child care sector needs to be a streamless part, because he wants people to go back to work. He wants the child care programs to start entering these kids into the program. Communication must be clear for us, because right now we're just panicking of, you want us to open, and now we have to accept these children, and we don't know if they have the disease or if their parents have it. So what do we do as family providers? Because remember, we either have 6 or 12 children. So as we look at the whole big picture, not just the little picture, the big picture, what is the governor rubric on this situation? Because we really haven't heard too much about it. And we want to sit at the table. We want this to be a connection that's transparent, because I love what I do. I love it dearly. I'm passionate about children. So my question is, what is the action plan? Because I don't want to close my program. And who was at the table? Are they going to call some providers to be at the table for this? Or are they just going to start creating regulations that does not fit our program? So I just want to see if that answer get answered soon as possible, because if we trying to open in 3 more weeks, what will that look like? Because I don't want to go to the point that I have to close my program for 2 or 3 weeks, and then other people are doing the same thing. So that's my ending. I thank you for your time, for listening, and stay safe.
Thank you so much for your insight and your heart in what you do. Donna, I believe you're next.
Yeah, so I think Mariama and I were just talking about the fact that what might be really helpful right now in this conversation is, you know, we're in this discussion about we need clarity and guidance.
Mm-hmm.
Providers need to know the answers to the questions that Stacy and Minette have put on the table. And they sort of connect directly back to the issues that Catherine Stevens, Harriet, and Steve raised globally. And so I was wondering, actually, if at least Catherine and Harriet and Steve might share a little bit about where do you think the responsibility lies for how we give direction to the early childhood sector? Is it really a state-by-state conversation? Should it be? Where do you think the financial burdens of this virus lie? Where do you think the drive to sustain quality? Do you see that as a federal obligation, a state obligation? How do you think that should be played out right now for either Harriet or Catherine or Steve?
Some of you, or probably everyone on this call, saw the Bipartisan Policy Center survey of parents and child care providers last month. And if you go on their website, they have, I think it's like a 60-page document with details on all the questions. And I think it's actually in the slide highlights as well. They asked parents who the parents thought were responsible. And the options were the federal government, the state government, local government, parents, and the child care operators. There was some partisan difference in terms of the role of the federal government. Not huge, though. There were not huge differences. And there was kind of a balance between state and federal in terms of what the parents were expecting. It was a surprising number of people who felt that the parents were responsible. Now, obviously, there are some parents who have a lot more resources than other parents. But I'd encourage you to take a look at that. I can look for it right now, just to get a sense of where people, and these were all, as you know, in the survey, they were all people with children under age 5. It seems unlikely to me, Harriet may have a better perspective, or Steve may have a better perspective on this. First of all, money always helps, but so much of the moving parts of this are going to have to be handled at the state and local levels. So it seems to me that working with the state is going to be absolutely essential, regardless of what happens at the federal level.
I'm happy to weigh in. So, Catherine, I think that the Bipartisan Policy Council in part underscores part of what we know, which is in the system we have currently, parents are the prime payers. The public isn't the prime financer. So to that degree, right, many parents are going to say, I'm responsible, because when they look at who's helping them, right, and there's an invisibility part of the state infrastructure. But I guess I would say in the current circumstance that we're in, and I think, Steve, you've been writing about this as well, though mostly in the pre-K part, we obviously need to continue to see stepped up investment from the federal government. Okay, they are in a unique position that the states are not in terms of making resources available to assist. The states are usually constitutionally constrained to have their own balanced budget. And so that's a big issue, and everybody's talked about that. You know, that doesn't mean that we shouldn't be demanding. And part of what obviously I have been trying to say is, in a situation where the work that everyone who's a provider is doing is so essential to the children and to the families, and we've been so underfunded, then now is not the time to retreat from trying to make sure resources are in the state budget to be able to assist with these issues. But we, in a unique way, the federal government is better positioned from a financing standpoint. In terms of the policy setting and these issues about how we're going to get from here to there, it does seem pretty apparent now. The states are in the driver's seat here, okay? And, you know, the states are left in an area where I know we're talking about what's the science tell us about the best, most safe way to have early childhood services available. We know way less than we should about how to do this. And we, you know, every day I read a different study around young children and disease transmission and spreading. So we're in an uncertain place, in a terrible predicament. But I think from where I sit, that these are opportunities for us as well to come together in our local community and also in the state to really try for people to work as hard as possible to think in a bigger way about the problems we have and how we're problem solving. So I guess I may be saying, Donna, there's a role for everyone here. There's a stepped up role in terms of investment strategy from the federal government. There is a necessity for more and more creative thinking and changes, basically sort of from this at the state level. And there is a need more than we've ever had that the kinds of supports that have been attempted to put into place to really support the provider community and support families are really there and maintained. So maybe not narrowing down, Donna, but to say, like, it's a time of crisis. There's a role for everyone in a time of crisis, but parents alone cannot solve this problem, nor can childcare providers by themselves.
Yeah, if I could just add to that, I think so the, this is the chart that I was talking about. So just to be clear, there were few people who said that parents were the primarily responsible. But there are parents who have enough money and they know that it is a time of crisis, and they know that they have enough money to pay for childcare. Now that's obviously, you know, just one portion of the market. The majority of people thought that it needed to be, Harry, just as you said, a balance between federal, state, and local. Parents who can pay for their own children. If we ever needed them to do so, this would be that time.
Can I make a comment here, Shelley?
Jim, we're going to hold this for the panelists. Thank you for 1 second. Thanks. So, Steve, unless you have a comment, I think it's an appropriate time to move to the next guest on the panel. So I just want to ask Steve if he has any comment to the question that I raised about federal, state, or local level parents.
Just one. There are some things that only some people can do. States are responsible for the regulations, quality standards, all of that. We don't know what we need to do. There will be continuing uncertainty. If we're to get through this well, we need to systematically pilot and collect data. So that I think the state needs to partner with providers so that there is a leading edge, figuring out the answers to our questions and the answers to their questions about what they need to do, rather than trying to than everybody. We're going to have a learning community here.
Well, very well said, Steve. And one of the frustrations I think the providers feel, Manette, Stacy, and lots of folks have talked about that. And obviously in the middle of an emergency, we learn a lot about what's missing. But we also learn a lot about what champions that we have. And so, you know, there's been a lot of questions about the bill that the House Democrats in the US Congress passed yesterday and the degree to which the hazard pay provisions apply to childcare or dedicated childcare funds. We have CARES Act money that's come to the Pennsylvania legislature, $104 million for childcare specifically. And so, you know, in Philadelphia, we wanted to ask one of our champions to join us today to share a little bit about what she did. In the early childhood world with First Up and our partners across the state, created a strategy based on talking to hundreds of providers of what the state could best do with the resources that it's receiving dedicated for childcare in this crisis. And not just the CARES Act money for childcare, but FEMA money that's come down, liability protections that are being discussed. So a broad range of things from PPE to liability to funding. And we inventoried all that in a package that Carol Alston will be talking about. But before she does that, we wanted to introduce Helen Gim, Councilwoman Helen Gim in Philadelphia, who took the lead here to take action on behalf of this sector. And we'd like for her to describe that because people are on from across the state, and we're hoping hearing from Helen will cause you to think about your local elected officials and how they can act to get the federal and the state government to respond to the questions we're discussing today. Helen.
Thank you so much, Donna. And it is a pleasure to join hundreds of childcare, early childhood, family, women advocates from around the state to really try to push on elevating the essential needs of young children, families, and women, particularly now at a time when so many are being left out of the conversation, are not around enough tables that are making critical decisions about people's livelihoods and about people's ability to maintain their own families and self-care. So I'm honored to join you. I always am on board with PCCY's work and the incredible work of so many activists that we heard from earlier. I just want to thank you for all your stories and activism. But I am here for a specific reason. We are in a time of an attitude where, you know, you can easily pivot to austerity, scarcity, and exclusivity that does not include the people that we love and care about and the families and organizations that we represent. So it is time to take action. And, you know, as soon as we heard from our best folks, including Donna, who reached out about what was happening with childcare and how childcare providers, about how family members, about how educators were going to be devastated across the state, but especially here in Philadelphia, we moved towards action. One of the most important things that we have to understand right now is that clarity, breadth, and unity are really important right now. So we got a letter together signed off by our mayor and all members of city council to be sent to our Philadelphia delegation, asking that of the money that was delivered, including those funds specifically dedicated to childcare, but also the additional $4.9 billion that Pennsylvania overall received in federal relief funding, needs to prioritize early childhood education and childcare. You know, to me, it is essential that this be seen as an issue that is embraced by city electeds, because it has to be core to the city's economy, because our work has to be part of a city's path to recovery, and particularly to neighborhood recovery. We can't take a path that this is the right thing to do, or it's the same thing to do, or it's a morally responsible thing to do. It has to take a path towards this is the most urgent thing to do. And the best way to do that is to unify your local electeds and to make a unified ask of the state that is very clear that among the things we asked for are for childcare centers to continue to receive childcare subsidies and contract payments for pre-K counts and Head Start throughout the duration of the pandemic, that childcare providers be compensated in revenues that would otherwise have been collected as co-payments, that we talk about investing another $100 million in childcare centers to cover uncollected tuition costs that should have been collected during this time period, that there's a childcare coronavirus protection fund for costs associated with rate changes or tort actions or any other types of measures, and that we offer funds for families who are already participating in pre-K counts and Head Starts for programming during this summer. It seems hard for us because we're all in community together, and this seems like a natural way that we talk about these things, but they are not the natural conversations that occur in too many of our city councils, our townships, and definitely not enough in our state legislature. We should be a state that has pre-K for every child across the board statewide, like they do in dozens of other states. We don't. That means that all of us on this call cannot be naive. We cannot hope for the best. We actually have to take tremendous action. So I encourage everybody who is on the call to immediately contact your local electeds, to organize your early childhood community, to also reverberate the call. Believe me, if you get 1 or 5 emails, no one's really paying attention. When you get to like 70, 100 emails, then people are gonna start to pay attention. If you get phone calls, if you get letters, if you write to your local paper and say that this has to be included because it is core to Pennsylvania or my township's local recovery. Childcare is the early childhood education is not only the foundation of young people's learning, it is also the kind of work that makes other people's work possible. No one with a family is able to go to work and able to go back when we don't have schools in session right now because they're closed until September. When we don't have options for summer care and programming, we need our neighborhood childcare providers to be supported, to be valued, and to be invested in, because that is how Pennsylvania is going to recover. When families recover and childcare providers help families recover, Pennsylvania can recover. When children are left behind and families are left behind, Pennsylvania will for sure be left behind. So I want a different approach that does not prioritize big corporations and bailouts for the horse industry and other types of, and gas and fracking in the state of Pennsylvania, because honest to God, we can smile and laugh and like chuckle, but that is some of the choices that are on the table right now. Do we want to make this a priority? Then we actually have to take collective action, and we can do this from the ground up. It is actually even more powerful if municipalities, localities start to echo this call as central to small business, localized, township-based, neighborhood-based types of recovery efforts, rather than big, huge blocks of categories that tend to like duke it out on other big blocks. When municipalities can come together and you get a unified voice from your local township, your mayor, your council members, and local organizations signing off together, we have a much more unified chance. And no matter what happens at the federal level, the state is paying attention, your municipality is now paying attention. And so it all works back into a long-term effort to make childcare, early childhood education, and childcare providers one of the central engines of Pennsylvania's economy and society. So thank you, Donna. Please, everybody, support your local childcare provider, obviously. Donate to PCCY if you can, and your favorite organization if you can. I can do this because, I believe very strongly this is not about charity. This is about us collectively making sure the people who keep us going and keep us connected during a time of real struggle are also supported. And small dollars mean a lot right now to every organization that is struggling. So I just want to thank the whole community on here. You guys are incredibly inspiring. You taught me how to be who I am. And thank you for letting me have a few moments.
Thank you so much, Councilwoman, and you're getting a lot of kudos from everybody listening to you. And I will say we're not asking for donations on this call, but thank you. But we will circulate, and we should have done it with the email to this event. We will circulate afterwards, of course, all the PowerPoint slides, but the letter that City Council members and the mayor sent. And let me make the point that that letter was signed by Republicans and Democrats. And that's essential here. This issue is not a partisan issue. This is one that is can be shared and is shared in Pennsylvania by Republicans and Democrats. And with that, Mariama, thank you so much.
No problem. So I believe that we'll next hear from Carol Austin. She's the Executive Director of First Up, and she's going to talk about some of the advocacy initiatives in Pennsylvania. Welcome, Carol.
Thank you. So I'm going to share my screen, and let's see, here we go. Okay, excellent. Slideshow. Okay, so, and thank you so much, Helen. You know, just a passion. Helen cares about education, youth, and children. She cares about that. And, you know, we have, I'm sure, a majority of people on this town hall meeting. You're here because you care about the same thing. And we have providers on this call. We may have some legislators on this call, you know, have some business owners or business leaders who are outside of childcare, the childcare industry on this call. We have some funders on this call. We have people from all walks of life and all demographics on this call. And what we need most of all is we need to have your voice be heard. You know, we need legislators to hear what you have to say. You know, to Helen's point, you know, you get 1 or 2 emails, that doesn't matter. You get 10 or 15, you start to pay attention. And even though this is a bipartisan issue, you know, we're at least in a time right now where there are so many competing priorities. And you better believe everybody else is shouting and screaming for whatever it is that they need. And we need this community and friends of this community to be shouting and screaming too, that there's no recovery without childcare. There's no recovery unless we pay attention to our youngest learners. And beyond the economic realities of that, you know, our youngest kids are our greatest investment. So we need to keep that at the forefront of our mind at a time where, yes, there's a lot of desperation and fear happening. We already know that, you know, we started along with PCCY and First Up and other state partners, and with incredible and generous funding from William Penn Foundation and now the Vanguard Start Strong for Kids Foundation, Strong Start for Kids Foundation, we've been able to launch a couple of statewide campaigns in the last few years. And these campaigns have allowed us to increase the number of quality programs. I'd say even in Philadelphia, I'd say from, I think, 24% to about 31%. And other initiatives that we've had as well, quality initiatives. And the greatest threat right now is quality. The greatest threat is the quality. I think Harriet made the point earlier that yes, quality can't be an afterthought, and it can't be. Because the ground that we gain in being able to ensure that every single child has a high quality early learning experience, the ground that we've gained over the last few years is threatened. And that means that what becomes threatened is really the future. You know, the future of our nation, the future of children, the children that have the opportunity to really grow up, to not necessarily need special ed services, to not have to go into the criminal justice system, because we know the data and shows that we have, you know, high quality early learning and just the benefits of high quality early learning. We know the opportunity to be able to read at the grade level by 4th grade makes a big difference. And so I don't have to speak to you about the benefits of quality early learning, but, you know, we want to ensure that we get other people on board, people from outside of this field. So, so these campaigns were started to be able to do exactly that, both the Pre-K for PA campaign and the Start Strong Pennsylvania campaign. And I'll share a little bit more about that later as well, and how you can take action. So let's talk about really what our asks are. And Donna and other people alluded to these asks. And these are very specific asks that for this time, you know, our goal here is to increase the number of quality programs that are available to children, infants and toddlers, and pre-Kers through these two campaigns. Our ask during this time of COVID-19 is really, we care about keeping quality programs whole and programs whole, so that we can hit the ground running and we can build from, and we can have that be a strong start and a foundation and build from there. To that end, we know that currently nearly I can't even see my own slides at this point. So let's see what we can do here. Okay, we know that currently nearly every learning program and childcare program in the state is closed. There's some that are open. And that 30% of these programs indicate that they'll not reopen if there's a prolonged shutdown. Just reiterating some of the points made earlier. That 70% of all children have their parents in the workforce. And as businesses reopen, 1 out of every 3 providers will no longer be there to support the workforce. The high quality programs will be the first to disappear, impacting children's social, emotional education, short and long-term goals. So these are all the things that we're attempting to address as we make these following recommendations, and we push for these following objectives with the funding. So we want to enable the rapid reopening of the early learning programs and a return to work for all families by continuing to pay childcare subsidies and pre-K accounts and Head Start supplemental insurance programs contracts for the duration of the closure. And currently in those, for those programs, those payments are guaranteed through June 30th at this point. So that's a win. And compensation for high quality providers for lost childcare subsidy parent co-pays. And we want to prioritize STAR 2 to 4 programs in that. So we know that what's not being paid for are these co-pays, which we know account for about 14% at least of all payments. And that's a big loss. Programs can't reopen if they're not complete, if they can't pay their staff to come back. We also want to cover a portion of the uncollected private pay tuition for high quality childcare programs. And we are going to prioritize those serving subsidized children as well at the STAR 2 to 4 level. And we want to know that, you know, the message we're sending to legislators is that doing so, you'll conserve unemployment compensation funds, and you'll stabilize the early learning provider capacity and ensure that we can reopen. Okay, next we want to ensure that we're protecting children and the childcare professionals. We want to do that by ensuring there's access to sanitation and training and funds for that as well. And then we want to ensure that to the degree that it is possible to happen, we did make a request to have a month of summer instruction for pre-K counts and Head Start programs so that we can ensure they can enter kindergarten ready. Now, of course, everything changes on a dime. As we all know, every day there's something new. But this was our ask, these were our asks. So how can you help? What is there for you to do next? What there is for you to do next is become a supporter. Become a supporter of Start Strong PA and PreK4PA.org. And this is how you sign up to be a supporter. When you sign up to be a supporter, you will automatically, all of our action alerts that we push out for you to connect with legislators or to make calls with legislators, you will receive those. You'll also be able to receive alerts around very specific other items. You can sign up to us to be able to write letters to the editor. We do all of that. We can support you in being able to write letters to the editor. If you're an organization, especially an organization outside of early learning as well, you know, we really welcome, we want the legislators to know that this is, you know, you're people coming from the family perspective who work in corporations. Employers like Vanguard, like you just heard Crystal speak, we want them to hear all of these diverse perspectives. So it's really critical. Or you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter and get our alerts and announcements that way. But today, very specifically, you know, we want you to sign up to be a supporter and to take action. To go to these sites, startstrongpa.org, take action, and PreK4PA.org, take action. And you'll be able to send, it automatically will populate, you'll be able to send a note to your legislator telling them that you care about childcare, that you care about pre-K, and that they must advance our stimulus ask. The next thing is, on the federal level, as so many people mentioned, and as Harriet pointed out, you know, states, federal government doesn't have to balance a budget. States do. So what makes one of the biggest difference right now is to ensure that that $50 billion that we're asking for at the federal level, that happens. So there is a link here to, and there are a number of national organizations who are working together collectively on that. And the National Women's Law Center specifically, this great link will allow you to access it and even make a call to your legislator. They have a script attached right there. You can make a call to your federal legislator and let them know that you care about childcare. Let them know that you want that $50 billion for childcare. Okay, so now is the time, and there's nothing more really for us to do than to take action at this time. So thank you.
Thank you, Carol. So we are at the end of our agenda. I'd like to thank all our panelists and all our participants for engaging in this town hall discussion. PCCY, First Up, and the United Way look forward to working with you to ensure that when Pennsylvania reopens, the child care sector will be ready on day one to serve children, families, and caregivers. Be well, everyone. Goodbye.